Hi, I'm Mike Mendez. I'm the director of the Gravedancers. This is the making of the ghosts. We're going to see behind the scenes of how those ghosts were made. All the ghosts were designed by a company called Spectral Motion, and a very talented gentleman named Norman Cabrera sculpted all of them. The first one is Emma. We're looking at a Photoshop that I did. How I do my concept art, because I'm not a very good artist, is I take images on Photoshop and manipulate it. That's a better way and much clearer way for me to get my ideas across. I wanted to create the last thing you would want to look over and see smiling back at you in your bed. So Norman took my design and he sculpted a clay maquette of Emma, and this is the first pass at it here, which is, I thought, very cool and got the kind of old crone concept, but I really wanted that big wicked smile, so he did another pass at it, and this I loved. I really thought he really captured it. What I wanted was something that, when you looked at it for a second, would really be very visually arresting. We called them kind of like shock heads, that you'd kind of look and, you know, they didn't need to move, but they were just kind of there, like something out of a fun house or something. So after I'd signed off on that, Norman took the maquette and cast it in resin, and then did a really awesome wicked paint job that I'm very jealous that I don't have one of those on my desk, but I think they're very awesome. So if one of the things I wanted to do with the design was I wanted to create a very uniform look with a smile. So Norman painted that and he did a really fantastic job, and that's where we kind of got the color scheme and the whole kind of look for it. So the next step would be to get an actress who we got from North Carolina, and we took a mold of her face and sculpted the design onto her face. And then we pulled the mold to make the final foam latex Emma, which you will see here. That's from the set. That's her real hair. We put in the eyes. It came out very cool. I was very happy with the way she looked. It was definitely a very kind of, shocking, freaky, kind of image. So I thought that came out pretty well. And here we'll see her in action in the movie, how she finally ended up turning out. The next is Dennis, a 5-year-old pyromaniac who I referred to as Fire Kid. This is my first very crude kind of Photoshop design, which I took basically the features of a real child and kind of extended into some kind of maniacal, crazed look. I then thought, well, wouldn't it be cool to set a kid on fire? So that kind of became the idea, to kind of have a demented little 5-year-old in flames. So that was my next kind of Photoshop that I did, was the design of Fire Kid. So Norman, once again, made a really cool clay maquette that we pretty much signed off on. I think there were very, very few notes on it. He was just a very cool, malevolent-looking 5-year-old, and, we just wanted to hold to that idea. So he painted that up and started on the head sculpt. Now, the tricky thing with this is that this is a little kid, so it's hard to take a mold of a little kid and put prosthetics. It's just not really comfortable for them, and it's hard to, keep them still for that long. And apparently they frown upon setting children on fire, so I wasn't allowed to do that either. So what I did was what we had to do, actually, because it was very important that he be in the kind of flame situation, is that we got a little person, an actor by the name of Chris Medina, who often doubles for children in movies and TV shows, and they took a mold of him, and we had to sculpt on top of his mold. The tricky thing on top of that, besides the fact that we couldn't get a child, is that we had to set him on fire. So materials like foam latex, that are usually kind of what we use to make prosthetics, was out of the question because it was too flammable. So we had to make a silicone mask that was fireproof. What also complicated it, as you'll see here, is that he had to wear a fire hood underneath. So even though it was molded from his face, there was a bit of it that was kind of removed and kind of, didn't fit quite naturally, and was hard to get over that hood. You can see right there, it's a little bit of a struggle to get the hood on first off, and then to get the mask on top of it. It was also tricky because he had contact lenses and couldn't see more than a foot in front of him, and setting him on in a room ablaze was a pretty dangerous thing, but thankfully everyone made it out all right. So only 2 people went to the hospital, actually, but he was not one of them. It's a little rubber masky looking due to the that there's a big thick fire suit underneath, but considering what it took to pull it off, and not having a lot of money to make several masks, I think it came out all right. Judge Langer was always my favorite of the designs. I may have mentioned in the commentary that the Haunted Mansion was very much a big influence for me. I kind of like the idea of grim grinning ghosts. That and things like Mr. Sardonicus or Mario Bava's Black Sabbath. I just always have really kind of liked that look. So we started off with a very Victorian kind of look for him, but I didn't quite feel that was creepy enough. So I kind of went to something that I had in a nightmare, which was this kind of 11-foot tall, really thin old man that I dreamt once I was walking upstairs and I turned around and something like that was like right behind me and I woke up kind of instantly. So, so that was kind of what I wanted to do. The initial concept for Langer was that he'd be 11 feet tall. So we started with a maquette of what the general look was, and Norman did a very cool kind of wicked looking old man that was pretty neat. And so he went ahead and painted that, but I didn't feel quite right about it. And the other thing was we were trying to figure out how we were going to make this guy an 11-foot tall guy. How are we going to pull that off? So the initial concept was to make like a 3-foot tall puppet that you see here. This is the maquette for the puppet. This isn't the actual puppet because we never got around to building it because we couldn't afford it by any imagination. The idea was to make a kind of a large rod puppet with animatronics in the eyes and the face, and put that in front of a green screen and green screen him in with real actors. We see Norman Cabrera here actually working on it, and you can see kind of the full scope of the body, which I love this thing. And again, it's really a shame that I don't have one, but I'm very jealous. I hope someone makes one day. It would be really cool. But that was kind of the idea, was that he was kind of a gangly giant. You could see how extended the arms are and how huge that we wanted to make him. But quickly we realized that we absolutely couldn't afford an animatronic puppet, so we had to kind of figure out how to do it. And they had suggested an actor by the name of Michael Johnson, who had done some prosthetic work, and he really was a very thin, emaciated guy. He had actually was in remission from lymphatic cancer. You could see him here as they cast they cast his face to make the mold on him, and his body was so fascinating and so interesting. We felt that we didn't need a puppet; that this was quite interesting in itself. So Norman went ahead and took a mold of him and started sculpting the design onto the actual positive of the actor. I think this is probably Norman's favorite too, because there's a lot of detail in here, and the thing is just beautiful. I'm a big fan of sculpture, particularly for makeup special effects, and I this thing still kind of takes my breath away, and all the detail he did with the teeth and every wrinkle. It's beautiful. So from this point, the next step is to actually make a full mask, which you'll see here, which has real hair and is made out of foam latex and is painted. It then is put onto the real actor, and his whole body was painted, and we put finger extensions on him to kind of really sell the whole idea of kind of this elongated creature. And I think it worked. I mean, it really kind of freaked out everybody on the crew and any set visitor we had. It still was pretty cool in person, and I think came out pretty cool on screen too. I mean, I really love working with Mr. Langer. So anyway, the next one is Evil Kiera, who was kind of our zombie character in the film. This is my initial Photoshop design. What I wanted was kind of an Evil Dead-like kind of floating creature. What I really wanted to do was treat her like a marionette, like there were like kind of ghost strings holding her up. Now, we couldn't really afford to do that because we'd have to build a whole set and stuff, so we had to settle for, basically a stunt person acting kind of rigidly and dragging her around by the most low-tech techniques possible. This was actually like the last makeup that we did because we didn't cast Josie Mara until about 3 days before shooting, and so they were waiting to start the design. So the unfortunate thing is that this is the one that we have A, the least amount of footage on, B, had the least amount of time on, so there were no chances for revisions. I like the way it looks, but the smile, that's kind of the important thing that is kind of the uniform that makes the Gravedancers ghosts the Gravedancer ghosts. Wasn't there. I mean, it's there, but it's not quite as wicked as I'd like. But with that being said, and under the time constraint, I think that it's a fabulous job that he did, and it came off pretty cool. And here it is in the final film. finally is, as I lovingly refer to it, the big head. This is an ending I like quite a bit, but this is my initial concept, which is a pretty goofy Photoshop that I did of Humvee going downstairs with a skull. My second director, Eduardo Cisneros, kind of stepped it up, and we really kind of fell in love with the idea that this was kind of the entity that we wanted to see. When you're doing a low-budget movie, particularly one as low-budget as ours, I don't trust relying completely on CG effects. So what I asked Spectral to do was build a giant chomping head. I wanted a giant puppet head. And Norman he loved the idea of doing it and really seemed to get his kind of influence on Evil Dead 2 and stuff like that, and really kind of made a very cool Evil Dead-like head. The trick was that it was quite an enormous head, and the other thing is that he had to make actually there you could see the big geek next to the big head, and I would also bring my cars over there because I had to had to get a basic idea of what we were doing, and I'd get very excited, and then they'd kick me out of the shop. Anyway, so this is actually the head. Once we had built an understructure of it and put the foam skin over it, and you can see here it kind of had a chomping mechanism, looks kind of like Jaws there, and it was like it was just like essentially it was on a C-stand there, and they just have this giant handle that would just make the thing open and close, and it was just a big chomping monster or whatever. So I liked the way it looked, and I thought it was a lot of fun. So the next step was for Norman to paint it up, and he did this kind of cool, very decayed zombie looking thing. What I love about it is that it's missing teeth and stuff, and why a ghost would be missing teeth I have no idea, but it's a giant head chasing a Humvee, so by that point it's kind of like who cares, kind of like whatever is whatever goes. We just wanted a really kind of neat looking thing for it. So after this step, the last point was to get hair onto it and put it in front of a green screen, and that's essentially what we did. Is we had a half a day of Norman puppeteering the big head in front of a green screen, and we'd move the camera by it to make it look like it was moving, and chomp it down, and had a fan blowing on it like it was a rock star or something, and it was pretty cool. It was definitely a fun day, and again, another one of those props that I wish was in my living room, but unfortunately it is not. So, anyway, and here's the finished result, which we put a fair amount of kind of CG spectral energy around it to kind of make it more a luminous kind of ghost-like thing. But again, everything you'll see that the head does is a big puppet. So again, I thought that was pretty cool. So. Anyway, so that is, hope you have a better idea of where the ghost came from, and yes, we'll see you next time. Thank you very much.